You're hitting PRs in the gym. The bar is loaded, the plates are stacked, your training log is a wall of green numbers. But your back aches when you've bent down to pick up your kids. You feel stiff getting out of the car. You feel locked, boxed in, almost mechanical when you move through a normal Tuesday. Raw strength is useless if you can't actually use it. Maybe it shows up differently for you. Maybe it's the moment you went to grab a suitcase off the top shelf of the closet and felt something in your shoulder you didn't like. Maybe it's the way you brace your whole body just to tie your shoes, the way your hips feel like rusted hinges the second you twist instead of push. None of that shows up on a training log. None of that shows up in the mirror. But your body knows. And deep down, you know too. Today, we're closing that gap. We're putting heavy lifting and animal flow on a table, side by side, and we're going to figure out, once and for all, what real power actually looks like and what it's actually been costing you to live without it. Stick with me, because by the end of this, I'm going to hand you the exact 30-day structure I use to fix this, and it's simpler than you think. I'm Dr. Aris Thorne, and this is Primal Unleashed. Welcome back, and if this is your first time here, welcome to the Standard. This is the silverback standard. Modern life makes us soft. Primal movement makes us unbreakable. We don't just lift weight, we reclaim our nature. That's the lens everything on this channel runs through, and it's the lens we're going to run today's question through too. So let's get into it. No fluff, no filler, just a straight answer. I want you to picture a guy I'll call Marcus. Marcus pulls 500 pounds off the floor. 500 pounds. He's proud of it, and honestly, he should be. That's a serious number, the kind of number that turns heads in any gym in the country. But here's what nobody talks about. Marcus also can't touch his toes without his lower back screaming at him. Marcus plays one pickup basketball game a year and spends the next 3 days walking like he's recovering from surgery. Marcus is gym strong and movement poor, and that combination is far more common than the fitness industry wants to admit. Marcus isn't an outlier. He's the norm. I could swap his name for 100 different men I've coached over the years, and the story barely changes. The numbers go up. The squat, the bench, the deadlift, and somewhere along the way, the body that's carrying all of that new strength has quietly become a cage instead of a tool. Why does this matter? Because traditional linear lifting, done in isolation without anything to balance it, tends to leave the nervous system brittle. It gets extremely good at one pattern. Pull the bar, push the bar, brace, repeat. But the second life forces you into something unpredictable, catching your kid as they trip, twisting awkwardly to grab a falling box off a shelf, planting your foot wrong on uneven ground, that same nervous system has no idea what to do. It freezes, or worse, it tears something trying to improvise a pattern it's never trained. This is why you see it constantly in physical therapy clinics, the strongest guy in the gym throwing his back out, reaching into the trunk of his car. Not because he's weak, because his body has spent years rehearsing one extremely narrow script, and the moment life hands him a different one, there's no rehearsal to draw from. The nervous system doesn't improvise well under load. It defaults to whatever pattern is most deeply grooved, and if the only pattern you've grooved is straight up and straight down, that's exactly what you'll reach for, even when the situation calls for something completely different. And it's not just Marcus. I see this pattern constantly in the men who come to me after years of dedicated lifting. They'll walk in proud of their totals and quietly embarrassed about everything else. They'll tell me, almost apologetically, that they threw out their back picking up a suitcase, that they pulled something playing tag with their nephew, that they avoid the trampoline park, avoid the hiking trail with loose rocks, avoid anything that isn't perfectly predictable because some part of them already knows their body isn't ready for unpredictable. That's not weakness. That's a training gap, and it's one almost nobody's talking about. So here's the question I want you to sit with for a second. Is your current peak strength actually serving you, or is it starting to feel like a cage? Be honest. If the answer is, I'm strong, but I'm stiff, and I'm a little afraid of my own back, you are not alone and you are not broken. You're just missing half the equation. And here's why fixing it now matters more than it might seem. This isn't just about comfort. The men who ignore this gap don't stay stuck where they are. They get worse, slowly, in a way that's almost impossible to notice month to month. The shoulder that's slightly tight at 30 becomes the shoulder you can't raise overhead at 45. The hip that feels a little stiff after a heavy squat session becomes the hip that locks up the second you try to get down on the floor with your kids at 50. Nobody decides one day to become immobile. It happens one untrained pattern at a time, compounding quietly in the background, while the only number anyone's tracking is the one on the bar. There's a second kind of strength most lifters never train, the kinetic intelligence that lives in ground-based animalistic movement. And the gap between raw iron and that kind of intelligence is exactly where today's conversation lives. On one side, you've got the brute force of the barbell. On the other, the fluid reactive power of moving like the animal your body was actually built to be. Most men pick a side. That's the mistake, and it starts with misunderstanding what the barbell can and can't actually do for you. Let's give heavy lifting its due because it deserves it. Mechanically, nothing on earth builds bone density and recruits maximum motor units like loading a barbell and moving it against gravity. In 2026, with everything we now understand about mechanical loading and progressive overload, heavy lifting remains, without question, the single most efficient tool for building a bigger engine. If you want raw horsepower, the capacity to produce enormous force in a single direction, barbells win. Full stop. There's a reason every serious strength coach starts here, and there's a reason I'm not telling you to abandon it. A heavy squat, a heavy deadlift, a heavy press. These movements teach your central nervous system to recruit an enormous number of muscle fibers at once in a coordinated, efficient pattern.
That skill is genuinely rare, genuinely valuable, and it forms the foundation of everything else we're about to talk about. Nobody on this channel is telling you to put the bar down. Consider what's actually happening inside your body under a heavy load. Your skeleton responds to that compressive force by laying down new bone density, literally reinforcing itself against future stress. Your tendons thicken and stiffen in a good way, becoming more efficient at transferring force from muscle to bone. Your nervous system learns to fire more motor units simultaneously, which is the actual biological definition of getting stronger. Not bigger muscles necessarily, but a brain that's gotten better at telling existing muscle what to do, all at once, on command. None of that is replaceable. None of that should be thrown away in pursuit of becoming more functional. You need that foundation first. But here's the part that gets left out of almost every strength coach's pitch. Horsepower without steering is just a crash waiting to happen. Consider what's actually happening inside your body under a heavy load. Your skeleton responds to that compressive force by laying down new bone density, literally reinforcing itself against future stress. Your tendons thicken and stiffen in a good way, becoming more efficient at transferring force from muscle to bone. Your nervous system learns to fire more motor units simultaneously, which is the actual biological definition of getting stronger. Not bigger muscles necessarily, but a brain that's gotten better at telling existing muscle what to do, all at once, on command. None of that is replaceable. None of that should be thrown away in pursuit of becoming more functional. You need that foundation first. But here's the part that gets left out of almost every strength coach's pitch. Horsepower without steering is just a crash waiting to happen. Consider what's actually happening inside your body under a heavy lift. It trains you to brace your entire torso into a rigid column and move that column up and down or forward and back along one fixed path. That's an incredible skill. It is also an extremely narrow one. Your joints, particularly your hips, shoulders, and spine, were never designed to live exclusively in that one plane. They were designed to rotate, to flex in multiple directions at once, to absorb force from odd angles and redirect it instead of just resisting it head-on. Your hip joint, for example, is a ball and socket joint capable of flexion, extension, rotation, and lateral movement, all in combination. But a heavy squat or deadlift mostly asks it to do just one thing: hinge in a straight sagittal plane, over and over. Your shoulder, similarly, is one of the most mobile joints in the entire human body, built to move overhead, behind you, across your body, at every conceivable angle. A bench press asks it to do almost none of that. It asks it to press, straight up, in one groove, thousands of times across a training career. The joint doesn't forget how to do the other things. It just stops practicing them, and unpracticed capacity has a way of quietly disappearing. So what happens to a body that only ever trains in straight lines? It gets phenomenal at producing force along that line, and it slowly loses the multiplanar agility it needs for literally everything else. Sprinting, cutting, climbing, wrestling with your own kids on a living room floor. You've built a massive engine and bolted it into a car with no suspension and no steering wheel. This is the moment most men need to hear clearly. You might have all the horsepower in the world, and you could still be losing the ability to translate that energy into anything other than a straight line. That's not a hypothetical. That's the guy who can deadlift twice his body weight and still tweaks his back reaching sideways for a seatbelt. Look at the athletes whose sports actually demand multi-directional power. Wrestlers, climbers, grapplers, gymnasts. Almost none of them train exclusively under a barbell, and it's not because they're weak, it's because their sport punishes anyone who only has strength in one plane. The wrestler who can only push and pull in straight lines gets thrown the moment his opponent attacks from an angle he's never trained against. The climber who only knows how to brace gets stuck the moment a hold demands a rotational reach his shoulders have never practiced. These athletes understand something most gym-goers never get taught. Maximum force production and maximum usable range are two completely different skills, and training one does almost nothing to build the other. Raw strength on its own is only half of a truly high-performance body. It's the half everyone sees and measures because it shows up cleanly on a spreadsheet. The other half, the part that lets you actually use that strength in the chaos of real life, doesn't show up on a barbell at all. It shows up on the ground. Think about it this way. A barbell only ever asks one question of your body. Can you move this exact weight along this exact path one more time? Real life never asks that question. Real life asks completely different ones, constantly, without warning. Can your shoulder catch you when you trip on a curb? Can your hip absorb the shock of an awkward step off a ladder? Can your spine handle a sudden off-axis pull when a dog yanks the leash the wrong way? A heavy bar can train you for any of that, because a heavy bar doesn't move that way. It moves in exactly one direction, and your body, being an efficient machine that it is, gets specifically and narrowly good at exactly that. That's not a flaw in heavy lifting. It's just the limit of what any single training method can do. And it means that if heavy lifting is the only language your body speaks, you are fluent in one dialect and functionally illiterate in every other one life actually requires. So what does the other dialect actually look like? This is where it gets interesting. This is where most people get the wrong idea immediately. So let's kill the misconception right now. Animal flow is not stretching. It is not a recovery day. It is not the soft, optional add-on you do after the real training is finished. I get it too. The name doesn't help. Animal flow sounds like something you'd find on a yoga studio schedule, sandwiched between a candlelit class and a breathing workshop. But watch someone genuinely skilled at it move through a sequence, shifting body weight from hand to foot, dropping into a low crawl, exploding into a jump, landing, and immediately rotating into the next position without a single wasted motion, and you'll understand immediately why that assumption is wrong. There is nothing passive happening there. The amount of full body control, grip strength, and explosive coordination required to move that way is genuinely brutal. And most men who try it for the first time, no matter how strong they are under a bar, are humbled within the first 60 seconds. Animal flow is a high-tension system built specifically to develop reflexive, fascia-driven power, the kind of strength that exists in the connective tissue webbing through your entire body, not just in the contractile fibers of a single muscle. When you move through ground-based sequences, crawling patterns, rotational transitions, weight shifting from limb to limb in unpredictable combinations, you're forcing your joints to generate and absorb force from angles a barbell will simply never touch. The names of the actual positions sound almost primitive on purpose. The beast, where you're crawling on hands and feet with your hips low and loaded. The ape, where you're shifting your full body weight explosively from a crouched position to your hands and back, like something out of a nature documentary. The crab, where your body moves sideways and inverted, forcing your shoulders and hips to stabilize at angles they almost never see under a barbell. The scorpion, which twists your spine through full rotation while your limbs are loaded in opposite directions. None of these are decorative. Every single one of them is solving a specific structural gap that linear lifting leaves wide open.
Here's what that actually unlocks. Your hips learn to rotate under load instead of just hinging. Your shoulders learn to stabilize while bearing weight at strange, off-center angles instead of just pressing in a fixed groove. Your spine learns to move as a flexible, segmented structure that can twist and recover instead of a single, rigid column that only knows how to brace. Your wrists, ankles, and the small stabilizing muscles around every major joint, the ones a barbell almost never asks anything of, start developing real, usable strength of their own instead of just coasting along for the ride. This is strength that was always available to you, strength hiding in the joints and the fascia, and barbells, for all their value, were never built to reach it. I want you to picture a different version of yourself for a second. Not weaker, not softer, a version of you that's just as explosive as you are right now under the bar, but also indestructible in every other direction. A version of you that can drop into an awkward lunge to catch something falling, twist out of a bad landing, and come up completely fine, because your body is actually practice generating power from chaos, not just from a fixed starting position. This isn't theoretical. Watch any genuinely powerful animal move. A big cat changing direction mid-sprint. A gorilla shifting its entire body weight from limb to limb without a single wasted motion. And you'll notice something. There's no rigid bracing. There's no single locked-in path. There's continuous, intelligent adaptation, force flowing through a body that's prepared for whatever angle the ground throws at it next. That's not an accident of biology. That's the result of a system that was built from the ground up to move in every direction, not just one. And it's worth remembering that this kind of movement isn't some modern invention either. It's older than the barbell by a long way. Long before anyone was loading iron plates onto a steel bar, the human body was already built and tested by exactly this kind of demand. Climbing, crawling, lifting awkward loads at awkward angles, reacting to unpredictable terrain. The barbell is a brilliant, modern tool for isolating and maximizing one specific quality, but the body it's training is the same body that spent the overwhelming majority of its existence moving like this, on the ground, in every direction, with no fixed path at all. We didn't invent this kind of strength, we're just remembering it. That's the promise of training like the animal you actually are. And here's the realization I want to land before we move forward. The choice was never supposed to be barbell or groundwork. That framing is the trap. The real answer isn't picking a side. It's a sophisticated integration of both systems working together, each one covering the blind spot the other one leaves exposed. So what does that integration actually look like in practice? Not in theory, in your actual weekly training. That's next. So let's define what this actually looks like, because do a little of both isn't a strategy. It's a guess. The 2026 standard I train my own clients to it isn't the bodybuilder and it isn't the gymnast either. It's what I call the hybrid primal athlete, someone who combines maximal force production with total body control and refuses to sacrifice one for the other. This isn't a label I came up with to sound clever. It's a description of a specific physical capacity that almost nobody trains for directly, even though almost every body would benefit from having it. The hybrid primal athlete can load a heavy bar and move serious weight with full confidence. He can also drop to the ground, move through a complex sequence of crawling, rotating, and explosive transitions, and come up without his joints screaming at him. He's not chasing two separate identities. He's built one body that's genuinely capable in both worlds because he understood early that specializing in only one was always going to leave him exposed. Compare that to the alternative. A man who specializes only in heavy lifting builds a powerful but narrow engine, strong in one direction, vulnerable in every other. A man who specializes only in flow-based bodyweight movement often builds incredible control and mobility, but caps out his absolute force production, leaving him agile, but lacking the raw horsepower to move serious load when it matters. Both paths, taken alone, leave a hole. And here's the part that should genuinely bother you. Most men don't even know the hole is there until life exposes it for them. A wrenched back, a blown-out shoulder, a moment where their body simply didn't have the pattern available to keep them safe. Picture two different versions of the same man 10 years from now. Version 1 kept lifting heavy exclusively, never touching anything else. He's still strong on paper, but his joints have gotten progressively stiffer. His mobility has quietly eroded year after year, and he started avoiding activities he used to love because his body feels unreliable outside the gym. Version 2 trained the hybrid way, heavy when it counted, fluid and ground-based when his joints needed it. And 10 years later, he's not just strong, he's still capable. He can still get on the floor and play with his grandkids and get back up without using furniture to push
off of. He can still hike, still react, still trust his own body in situations that aren't scripted. That difference isn't genetic. It's a decade of decisions about what to actually train. The competitive edge in the gym, in sport, in your actual day-to-day life belongs to the man with usable 360-degree strength. Not strength that only works when the conditions are perfect, the bar path is clean and the floor is flat. Strength that works when things go sideways because you've trained for sideways. That's the difference between a man who survives an unexpected moment and a man who's simply ready for it before it even arrives. No more guessing which one to prioritize. You build both on purpose, not as two separate hobbies competing for your limited time and energy, but as one integrated standard of physical capability that most men never even know to aim for. Now, I know what some of you are thinking because I hear it constantly. If I add in all this ground-based movement, won't it eat into my recovery and tank my lifting numbers? It's a fair question, and the honest answer is only if you program it badly. Done right, flow-based training on your off days actually improves recovery because it increases blood flow and joint mobility without adding the kind of heavy mechanical load that requires days to bounce back from. You're not stacking fatigue on top of fatigue. You're filling the gaps between your heaviest sessions with exactly the kind of movement your joints are craving anyway. The men who try this and quit usually quit because they treated it like a second full workout instead of what it actually is, a different tool used at the right time for a different job. The other objection I hear constantly is I don't have time to train two completely different systems. I understand the concern, but this isn't about doubling your training time. It's about being intentional with the time you're already spending.
A focused 20-minute flow session does more for your long-term durability than an extra 20 minutes of accessory lifting you're probably half phoning in anyway. This isn't addition, it's a smarter allocation of the hours you've already committed to training. This is a moment I want you to feel something click. If you've been chasing bigger numbers in the gym while quietly noticing you feel more breakable, not less, that combination, heavy iron plus ground-based multi-directional movement, is exactly what's been missing, not as a replacement for your training, as the missing other half of it. I'll go a step further. The men who actually look and move like the apex version of themselves, the ones who are dense with muscle, but also genuinely athletic, who can throw a heavy lift one day and move through a complex ground sequence the next without their body fighting them, they aren't genetic outliers. They're not doing anything mystical. They simply refuse to specialize too early. They built the engine and the steering system at the same time, on purpose, instead of bolting one on as an afterthought years later when an injury forced the issue. So now the question shifts from which one is better to how do I actually build this? That's not a theory problem anymore. That's a programming problem, and it's one I've already solved. Here's how we close the gap between heavy iron and fluid, reactive movement, deliberately and in a way that doesn't require you to throw away the strength you've already built. Inside the Primal Unleash digital training program and our elite membership, I've built a framework specifically designed to integrate compound lifts with flow-based sequences so they reinforce each other instead of competing for your time and energy. You're not choosing between getting stronger and getting more mobile. You're training both systems in the same week, often in the same session, so your nervous system develops maximum drive and multi-directional control simultaneously, instead of one slowly cannibalizing the other. Here's roughly what a single week looks like inside the protocol. 2 days are anchored around your heavy compound lifts, squat, deadlift, press, done exactly the way you'd expect, full intensity, real loading, because that foundation never goes away. 2 more days are built around ground-based flow sequences, the beast, the ape, the crab, the scorpion, and their progressions, layered specifically to target the rotational and multiplanar gaps your lifting days leave open. And critically, every single session, lifting or flow, opens with a short, targeted warm-up sequence designed to wake up exactly the joints that day's training is going to demand. So you're never walking in cold and asking your body to perform a pattern it hasn't even rehearsed that day yet. This isn't about adding a random 10 minutes of stretching to the end of your lifting day and calling it balanced. It's a structured progression. Heavy compound work on the days your nervous system is fresh and ready for it. Ground-based rotational sequences layered in to keep your joints, your fascia, and your reactive capacity sharp. All of it building toward one outcome. A body that's explosive under a loaded bar and completely at home moving on the ground.
in the chaos, in the moments life doesn't ask your permission before it tests you. By week 2, most guys notice the stiffness that used to show up after heavy training days starts fading. By week 3, things that used to feel awkward, getting up off the floor, twisting to reach something behind them, catching their balance on uneven ground, start feeling automatic again, the way they did before years of straight line training quietly took that capacity away. By the end of the 30 days, you're not just measuring progress in pounds on a bar, you're measuring it in how your body actually feels living the rest of your life. If you're ready to actually do this, instead of just thinking about it, here's your next step. Go download the Primal Unleash Hybrid Blueprint. It's the exact framework I walk you through inside the program, built to take you from stiff and one-dimensional to genuinely indestructible in 30 days. Links in the description. Join the Primal Unleash community there too. This is a group of men who are done choosing between strong and capable, and have decided to build both at once. I'm not asking you to abandon what you've already built. Every pound you've put on that bar matters, and it stays. We're not tearing down the engine. We're finally giving it the steering wheel it's been missing. 30 days from now, you could still be the guy who hits 500 on the deadlift, except this time when your kid leaps at you sideways off the couch, where your foot catches an uneven patch of trail, your body already knows exactly what to do with that force. It absorbs it. It redirects it. It doesn't break. That's the real shift here. Not abandoning the strength you've worked years to build, but finally giving it somewhere to go. A powerful engine with no steering was never the goal. A powerful engine that can take you anywhere, over anything, without flinching. That's the goal. That's what these 30 days are actually building toward, one session at a time. Because here's the truth I want you to leave with today. You don't have to pick a side between the barbell on the ground. Real power was never about choosing one. It's about refusing to be limited by either. Think back to Marcus for a second. The version of Marcus who only ever lifts heavy is going to keep hitting bigger numbers for a while, right up until his body forces him to stop, one tweak, one strain, one bad twist at a time. The version of Marcus who builds the hybrid standard doesn't have to choose between those two futures. He keeps the strength he's earned, and he adds the one thing that was always missing, the ability to actually trust his body in the moments that matter most, the ones that have nothing to do with a gym at all. Modern life makes us soft. Primal movement makes us unbreakable. We don't just lift weight, we reclaim our nature. Real power isn't a number on a barbell. It's a body that's ready for anything, anywhere, at any moment. The kind of readiness that doesn't ask what's coming next because it already knows it can handle it. That's not arrogance, that's preparation. And right now, that preparation is one click away, waiting for you to actually take it. I'm Dr. Aris Thorne. This has been Primal Unleash. If this resonated, you know what to do. Subscribe, share it with the guy in your life who's strong but stiff, and drop a comment telling me which side you've been neglecting, the iron or the ground. I read every one. And if you want to see exactly what week 1 of the hybrid protocol looks like in practice, the next video breaks it down movement by movement, step by step, so you can see precisely how the lifting days and the flow days fit together inside a single week. Until then, go move like what you actually are.